Hello, this is Dominique Beaumonte, your host, and this is episode 15 of your favorite podcast, Season with Salt. I hope you enjoy it. This episode, I have a special guest with me, April White, and she and I will be discussing deconstructing the story of Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi within the context of advising, mentoring, encouraging, engaging in discourse with Christian singles. So hopefully you enjoy it, and I hope to talk to you soon. So there are a lot of biblical narratives that depending on how you were raised, like you have probably not taken the time to deconstruct. And I think it's really important because sometimes we preach things because we're being eisegetical and we want to connect the Bible to common day life, but we can sometimes do those out of context. And one of the most misused texts in the Bible is centered around the life and happenings of Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. Today, I have a special guest with me, a person who is a Bible scholar in her own right, and she is very reluctant to participate in activities like this because she feels like her voice is not suitable for recording, but we have to disagree. But I'm happy that she's agreed to have this conversation with me. So for those of you who are familiar with the book of Ruth, it is the story of a woman by the name of Naomi who loses both of her sons and her husband, and she becomes a widow, and the book opens by her giving her two daughters-in-law the choice to return to their native land or follow her. Well, not really so much the choice to follow her, but the choice to return to their native land. It is Ruth, her daughter Ruth, that says, no, it's my goal to go wherever it is that you go. The number one misconception about the book of Ruth, from my perspective, is that people think that it's a love story about Ruth and Boaz. Or they might consider it to be a narrative about caring for widows. Or they might consider it to be a narrative about family and family sticking together. However, there are a lot of subplots, and ultimately, the book of Ruth is about the redemptive Father and Jesus Christ. However, the life and times of Ruth have entered into the context of pretty much all singles, because you will hear people on a regular basis saying, Ruth better go get her Boaz. And people construct this narrative that Ruth is this eligible bachelorette and Boaz is this eligible bachelor, and they're just going to get together and they're going to get married. I want my guest to chime in and tell us what's wrong with that narrative.
Okay. So I'm going to first say that I would not normally do a podcast, but as I was reading this, after a conversation I had about singleness, it struck me as so interesting that the story that we use and tell ourselves has a little bit more detail and nuance.
Okay.
And I will also say that as a single woman in church, we don't get a lot of instruction about how to partner with someone. And any biblical instruction generally points to this book. So when you're talking about all the functions and the messages and the themes coming out of Ruth, the primary one for single women is, this is how you conduct yourself. You work in your field and you mind your business and you wait to be noticed by a powerful man. And then we all celebrate when this powerful man, this Boaz, shows up because he's our redeemer. He's our kinsman redeemer. He's going to cover us, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's to start off. Now, what was your question?
Okay, yes, no, I appreciate you opening up with that. So, like so first of all, like a lot of things in like popular Christendom, like they are like pointing toward the women. Like, there are scriptures about being modest, but women need to be modest. There are scriptures about like, he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and usually that scripture is pointed towards women, like, and they're saying, don't go out looking for a man, wait. And so that it creates a lot of uncertainty about like how we interact. Is sort of like, you're waiting for me, like I'm waiting for you, like,
right. And I think that's the problem with that scripture, because it isn't an instruction to the woman, mm-hmm. It's an instruction to a man.
It's a proverb.
It's a proverb.
It's a best practice.
It's a best practice, right? But we from that scripture, we glean from that, okay, well, if he that findeth a wife, that means me as a woman, I need to somehow be in a position to be found. I need to hide myself. We glean that instruction when it's actually not there.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, we do glean that, and we glean that instruction. And I think regularly it also sets up this mindset that, like, so the Bible creates this, the man is supposed to be the initiator. The Bible sets the platform that a woman is the weaker vessel. She comes from the rib of Adam. And so there is like some opportunity to promote the idea that men need to step out and they need to start like life, by, looking to be the husband of one wife, looking to be responsible for a family. The problem is with the narrative with Ruth and Boaz is that it's actually the opposite.
Right.
Right? Like who takes the initiative in this scenario?
Right. So should we walk through the story?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you gave the background. So now Naomi and Ruth are in Naomi's homeland. Mm-hmm. And Naomi has a relative, Boaz, mm-hmm. who has some land. Mm-hmm. And he has some people working on the land to gather up the crops. I believe mm-hmm. it was wheat or barley. Mm-hmm. And so Naomi instructs Ruth, go gather these crops because we need to eat. Mm-hmm. And so Ruth then goes into these fields. She's gathering the crops. She's working side by side mm-hmm. with Boaz's servants mm-hmm. or the people that work for him. Mm-hmm. And he hears her story and is impressed by how dedicated she is, her mm-hmm. faithfulness. So that part we can all agree on, mm-hmm. right? I believe that he was impressed by that, and the deeds that he did and the favor that he gave her was more charitable.
Yeah, there's no reason to infer that like he was looking at her with her eyes.
Right.
Like there's no reason to infer that. It's like if you're at work and you're a woman and your manager is a man and he notices your work ethic, like that, you're not going to get married. Like right. just recognizing the work that you do to contribute. Now, undoubtedly, because of the age difference, like there might be some room to infer that this beautiful 40-year-old woman, like, is a hard worker and she looks good. Like
right. But it definitely wasn't. It definitely wasn't, I'm pursuing you romantically.
That would be a reach, yes. The reach
that would be a reach.
And we've been making that reach. Okay,
so then what happens is he gives her all of this barley to take home or this wheat to take home that day. And when Ruth shares that with Naomi, Naomi's like, oh, okay. So he's generous.
He likes you.
Naomi puts that in words.
Right. He must like you.
He likes you. So here's what you do. And she gave her very specific instructions of how to act the next day when they were gathering the harvest. And yes. And they were on the threshing floor, which is separating the wheat from the other plants.
Okay, we're on the threshing floor.
Okay, we're on the threshing floor. So Ruth's instructions were to go discreetly, mm-hmm. wait till he's eaten and drank, maybe wine, maybe not, And when he goes to sleep, and he's still out on the threshing floor, so he hasn't gone home. When he goes to go to sleep, uncover his feet and lay down at his feet. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to infer anything. Mm-hmm. So she lays there, and then when he wakes up, he's startled, and he's like, who is this? Mm-hmm. Who are you? Mm-hmm. What are you doing? And this is the part that when I read this, I was like, oh. So verse 9, he says, this is Ruth chapter 3, verse 9. And he said, who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. So this spread forth your skirt, she's not asking him just to cover her with a blanket. Mm-hmm. She's asking him to take her as a wife. Mm-hmm. Because then what would for thou art near kinsman, what would that have to do with anything if she was just asking him to cover her with the blanket?
So, let me just throw in something too, because I think that sometimes this narrative goes undiscussed too. This whole thing is curated by this emotional response, and there's a big picture view from the perspective of Naomi, right? And I think who we all, man, woman, we all have a Naomi in our life that's like, ooh, you should say hi to her. Like, ooh, you should walk up to her. Ooh, you should like there is this, and women tend to be more engaged in that than men, but them old church mothers want you to get married too. And they can have a Naomi spirit, like, okay, here's what you do next. And it's just
we're going to come in our corner, we're going to plot your action steps.
Right, and we're going to plot your action steps, and I'm going to give you this trade secrets. I don't know if this is going to work, but this is what you need to do. And I think that, so that's one piece. The second piece here is that it deconstructs the idea of who takes initiative.
Right.
Like when you are both aware of it wasn't that Boaz was unaware of the policies and procedures and covenants and rules associated with Jewish life. He knew all this.
Right.
Like he could have, the role could have been reversed. He could have been like, I'm gonna get drunk. You look good. You're going to come on my feet.
Meet me at my threshing
floor. And the rest is going to be history. But it's Naomi who curates this, and she tells, and a part of it is like Naomi being like, oh, we got to survive.
Exactly.
Right? Like, we got to live, and I want a grandbaby. Right?
Right. Right.
Let's be real. Naomi's be wanting a grandbaby, and they get real strategic. When the opportunity presents itself.
They really do. And I'm going to support what you were saying, because so then his response is, essentially, he says, wow, you'd be interested in an old guy like me? You wouldn't be interested in a younger man?
In other words, I had never even thought about this. It just didn't seem like the right thing.
I didn't consider it. I just thought you were a hard worker.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to find you.
Giving you some extra wheat.
Right. You just look like you needed something.
And then he says, in verse 11, he says, I will do all that thou requirest. Essentially, I'm going to do what you have asked. Again.
You want to marry me.
She said, hey, can you be my covering? He said, all right, I'll do that.
Okay.
I guess, since you asked.
Right. In other words, yes, I will accept your hand in marriage.
She got on one knee.
She did get on one knee.
She was by the feet.
She was laying down at his feet.
So, and then from there, he goes and does all the work to make sure that he does it the correct way, and everything is proper. And I think that's the part we focus on when we focus on finding my Boaz and my kinsman redeemer cometh, because he does have to go through these steps in order to secure this relationship. But it's clear that she initiated the relationship part of it.
And in context, his work to be available and to be someone who could follow through on her proposal, it required some level of humiliation on her part. Right. Like, does anybody else want to marry her?
Right.
I mean,
and in fact, when he went to ask about it, he asked about, we have this land, and the other person who was eligible for the land said, I'll take it. And then Boaz says, oh, but it comes with a wife, Ruth. And then the other man said, oh, no, thank you.
Mm-mm.
So it is a level of humiliation.
Right.
Yeah.
She cute and all, but
right.
I got what I got.
Right. Right. Yeah, I got my own household.
Right.
You can go ahead and keep the land if it comes with her.
Right. And so it's not that the Bible story has no reference. It's not that it has no validity. It's not that it's not a powerful story.
Right.
It's just that our context is generally that it's a love story because that's how it's presented. And it creates like this gender specific, like, you go get ready, you overdo it, lady. Right. You underdo it until she presents herself as an interest. But it's like, like, what would it feel like to you, Miss April, to be told, like, you got to do all the work up until the point where he decides that he's going to marry you?
I reject that.
Right.
As a woman, as a Christian woman, as a person with a measure of pride even.
Right.
I reject that.
Right. And the other thing I think that this leaves out is this idea that, like, what happens when the tables are turned? Because we don't talk about that. When the woman is a business owner. Like, right. when the woman is the breadwinner, when it's Boaz that is working in the fields,
right?
That Ruth owns, right?
How does then she conduct herself? Because that's the biggest takeaway for me, is if this is supposed to be the template of how I'm supposed to conduct myself as a single woman who wants to be married, exactly what you're saying. If I have my own fields, right. How then do I conduct myself?
Right. And so I gotta, it's not really a negative, like, thing to submit, but, So I think the invitation here is for us to, first of all, number one, we have to reconsider how we have been talking about singleness in the Christian community, and what we define as gender roles, and what is just something that we've kind of come up with, because there are some opportunities for men to challenge, like, toxic masculinity, even in Christian relationships. And there are some opportunities for, successful, brilliant women to submit. But there is also, like, this false narrative that I think is perhaps one of the reasons why people aren't really finding love, because they're waiting for something to happen. And, like, relationships are work. And, like, somebody said that relationships aren't 50-50, they're 100-100. And in this case, because of the implications of the kinsman redeemer and the need for the lineage to continue so that Jesus could come and save us, like, it was appropriate for this arranged marriage to take place. However, it is not going to be the narrative for every relationship, and it is not going to be the narrative for every strategy to build and develop relationships. And so, like, whatever your Christian narrative is, or whatever your context is, like, consider which false narratives have been used to, like, chain you into this narrow way of thinking about relationships. I know for me, like, the narrative that I have always challenged is sort of like, you go to the church, like, you get somebody at the church where you go to, or, like, nobody ever said where I was supposed to find a wife if I didn't go to the club, but I didn't have an interest in anybody at my church. And so, like, there was this stigma associated with, like, online dating but at the same time, like, there's never any expectation for what I was supposed to do in order to be married. And most of the people who are bold enough to outline the expectations are people who already been married for 50,000 years, and just came into this idea of how people partner like in a way that is unrealistic for 2019. So yeah, I think that I just want to challenge people to have this conversation in the Christian community. And like, I think one of the reasons why I think it's really, really, really important to be having this conversation is because like you are outdated in your mindset if you believe that like the youth of today, when I'm talking about youth, I'm talking about high school up, are engaged in this like antiquated way of communicating and building relationships with each other. Like our youth are using online tools, right? Like there are, even if it's just like the way that we use our phone, like adults are connecting and building relationships, whether they be professional or personal, on Instagram and Snapchat and LinkedIn and Facebook. And if adults are doing that, then so are youth, and they're learning from us. Go to a restaurant tonight, go to Red Robin tonight, and look at the nearest family with some tweens and preteens, mom and dad. Pretty much everybody's going to have a phone, and they're going to be using it to do something. And there's kids are doing more on their phones than just playing games. It's not 2008. It's 2019. So how do we need to reinvite ourselves to have a conversation about the way that men and women connect, the gender roles that we have prescribed for people, and then really what's in God's will, and how we can teach it effectively so that people don't have to be doing things in secret because we haven't validated like the ways that people connect. You know what I mean? So thank you so much for joining this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank my guest, April.
You're welcome. Thank you for giving me a platform, because we know that I was really excited about this revelation.
Yes, she was really excited about this revelation. I mean, as soon as I walked in the door, she was like, oh my goodness. Ruth proposed. And then I've been singing Kelly Price's He Proposed to Me, but I've been saying She Proposed to Me. Anyway, if you don't know that song, I'm just going to invite you to look it up, but unless you don't want to. Thanks.